to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by the Sheridan Report and the Retired Boxers Foundation. Make sure you check them both out. I am your co-host for Inside Boxing Daily, Mike Goodpaster. Like now, I would like to welcome my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
Shit, man, I'm always good. Let's talk some boxing, Mike.
You're not supposed to cuss when we're on here. What the hell?
Well, I figured, I got to start it off. I got to get it right, especially with the content we're about to cover.
All right. We could just call this show Assholes and Wannabes. How about that?
Let's do it, man. I like it.
All right. So we're going to start off with Deontay Wilder, asshole. Tyson Fury, asshole. So Tyson Fury today tells Deontay Wilder that you got to go get yourself known first in the U.S., then I'll fight you. That was not his line a couple weeks ago when he wasn't with Bob Arum, Top Rank. So I call bullshit on Tyson Fury here with this because he's basically just towing the company line and being a good boy.
Man, what I think it is I also think it's not only that, but I also think it's I think it's a mixture of him wanting so he's got to do some PR damage here. I mean, a lot of us were expecting the rematch to happen early this year. I mean, the talk of it being, what was it, March 18th was, I mean, that was months ago, so a lot of us expected this big fight to happen, and now it's not. And Fury's on Twitter, tweeting away like, oh, I'm not afraid of nobody, don't use politics. And it kind of seems like that's what he's using to avoid this immediate rematch. It just feels like politics. And again, I don't think either one of these guys is scared of the other. So I'm not going to trump this up as if it's some real big deal, because I do think we are going to get the fight. I think Top Rank is going to put Fury in with a soft touch, and Wilder's going to get the same thing. They're going to try to get Deontay Wilder to score some big knockout, and they're going to hope Fury gets a knockout too, because I don't think a lot of us are going to want to watch him box for 10, 12 rounds, and just you got to put on a show, right? You got to try to sell the thing. But for me, it seems like it's damage control on Fury's side, because Wilder seems to want it. I got to give him credit there. He doesn't seem. I mean, I know him and Andre Ward had a little back and forth on Twitter. And Wilder's like, "Well, hey, I wanted it. Fury doesn't want it right now. He's the one making excuses." And so, the guys who fall in the Fury camp, and I've always kind of find it, a little odd when you have these apostles of fighters. It's like, dude, you don't need to toe a company line. These are not, guys that are your homies or, cutting you in on the paychecks or anything. Like when they start talking about purses and stuff with Mayweather and all this nonsense. Dude, you're not friends, okay? You don't have to be an apostle of this guy. You're not going to the Last Supper. Just don't worry about the stuff so much. But with Fury, again, I think it's damage control. I think Wilder clearly looks like he wants it a little bit more than Fury does right now. And again, I do think they both want it, but it's just Wilder seems to be making a more open case that he's willing to put his chips all in and go get it.
Yeah, but don't you think that's more because Fury is widely perceived of wanting to fight. So with him, I don't think there's as much desperation for the fight as there is with Wilder, who did lose the fight. And the only people that don't think Wilder lost the fight are the fanboys of Wilder, who will defend him no matter what. But if you watch the fight with an open mind and impartial, Wilder lost that fight. So to me, I mean, even though that fight scored a draw, Fury was the winner. And usually the winner, especially if he's an underdog, isn't as apt to be desperate to get in the ring again with a guy that is perceived that he beat the first time.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. But it seems as if since Joshua, the problem with that partly is that Fury hasn't targeted the big British showdown with Anthony Joshua. So it's when you're delaying a rematch that looks like it's going to happen anyways. Therein lies the problem. I mean, Fury, yeah, I don't think even if he would have went on to Anthony Joshua after beating Wilder, I don't think very many people would have blamed him, and most people would have looked at him as the victor. I mean, I already talked about this when we mentioned this before. The two major independent ratings organizations moved Fury up to number 2 in the world at heavyweight division because they saw what most of us saw. Fury won the fight. But the problem is just partly because we're going to get a tune-up fight, and he hasn't targeted, a guy like Anthony Joshua. So it just feels like it's being delayed. But who knows? I don't know what goes on in these backdoor deals. I mean, a lot of us don't. A lot of us jump to conclusions, and I wouldn't be surprised if Top Rank was like, hey, we've been doing this a while. If we put it off for a little bit and let it marinate, you're going to do much bigger numbers or significantly better numbers, something like that. And Fury's like, hey, well, with the deal that I just got for ESPN, why the hell not?
Yeah, but my only problem with that is it makes more sense for him to wait. And all the people to say he's afraid. As you said, neither one of these guys are afraid. They're both professional boxers. And I still think they're both basically being told what they're going to do. And when you look at it, the thing that sticks out to me is I hope they fight at the end of this year. I'm still not sure they will. But coming off a first fight that was, I don't think it was a great fight, but it was better than people anticipated it would be. I think it's a big fight if you do it March the 18th. I don't see how anything that happens in between by Wilder fighting Dominic Breazeale makes it even any bigger.
Yeah, I don't know either, especially when there's question marks surrounding who Tyson Fury's going to get. I mean, who do you put Fury against that's going to make him look particularly good? Because in the heavyweight division, you need knockouts. And I can see Wilder doing that to somebody like Breazeale, because Wilder, again, say what you want of his sloppy style and poor technique and whatever. I mean, the dude at least goes for the knockout. With Fury, he just has a tendency to box and coast to the finish line. And that's not the sort of thing you need when you're trying to marinate a potential big heavyweight fight. But I don't know, man. We'll see who they get. It's still tough to say. Wilder, I think, can make a sort of statement to maybe build it a little bit more. But I don't know. Maybe Top Rank just wants to run the PR campaign, think they can do it longer and better than what it did before, and generate bigger numbers. I want to see the big fights now. I'm not in all that stuff. That's why I'm not going to sit here and play camps. But I don't know, man. It is what it is at this point, and we just got to deal with it.
Yeah, I think this. I think if he was to fight a guy like Adam Konaki, I think for as long as that fight lasted, it would be a war and may be able to help him. I think with Breazeale, though, I don't think there's enough respect or notoriety from him. Not that Konaki's got a huge following, but he does have a segment of the population that
he's a white guy.
Yeah, I just don't think with Dominic Breazeale, I was thinking more he is Polish, and there's a lot of Polish people to go watch it. But if you want to call him a white guy, that's fine. But
he's a fringe white guy.
He's a fringe white guy. He partially. So I think in the end, if you think that either one of them's afraid of each other, you're nuts. If you think that Wilder beat Fury the first time, you're nuts. And my only fear is, it looks to me, from everything you see right now, which could all change by the time we wake up tomorrow, that they're talking about Joseph Parker for Tyson Fury. And my worry there is this. That, to me, is going to be a bore fest. And I mean, and Joseph Parker's a talented guy. They're going to stand there and look at each other for 12 rounds. And I don't think it does anything to help a fight if he's going to fight a guy like that.
I think you're right. I think you've got to give Fury somebody that he can. Well, you don't give him somebody from New Zealand. I mean, the Wilder Fury fight is going to be on American soil. So find somebody American or somebody who's been fighting here a while. You got to. For me, it's you don't throw him in with somebody from New Zealand, but of course that would make some sense. I mean, we've been over this time and time again on the show, and we'll keep going over it. Joseph Parker has Bob Arum has, I think, part promotional rights to Joseph Parker. So, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that. I don't know, maybe they even throw him in with Oscar Rivas, who just upset Brian Jennings, who is, a top-ranked guy. So, I don't know. It's tough to say who exactly they're going to give him. I mean, Rivas, I think, would be a decent styles matchup just because, I don't know, Rivas, he's aggressive. I mean, he can hit, but, Fury just seems like he'd be too long for him. But I don't know, man. I think you put it on in America and you try to sell it here. Joseph Parker, I don't think that does anything for the brand, and I'm not with the way they box stylistically, I'm with you, Mike. I don't think this does much to sell the fight.
Yeah, that'll be 86 punches landed to 72 or some bullshit again, or worse. Um, I'm tired of it. They need to fight each other, or one of them needs to fight Joshua. The only thing they're doing is hurting boxing, and it seems like this year, especially, and each year, I think it's gotten a little worse. That the way things are going, it's not going to kill boxing because boxing's always going to exist. People say it's never going to kill boxing, but the way this is going, a year or two from now, we're going to have to pay decent money to see anything worth a crap because they're going to put themselves off of the network TV stuff because you got to get ratings to do that, and they're not building fighters and they're not making good enough fights to be able to do that.
Right. Yeah, exactly, man. I mean, people need to understand you don't have to be an economist to see this sort of stuff happening time and time again. If you put things on free TV, which you got to give PBC credit for trying to do, if you're going to do that, you have to put on the Keith Thurman's versus Sean Porter's. Those were damn good fights. That was a damn good fight.
Huge numbers.
Exactly. This is not rocket science. But when you have all these separate entities wanting to play ball by themselves, trying to milk things for as much as they can, you're going to end up getting pay-per-view fights because they're not wanting to risk their guys. We talked about Jaime Munguia, right? Okay, versus Dennis Hogan. It's a low-risk fight. We're talking about non-punchers. This is the sort of stuff that we get far too often, and it hurts the sport. That's why you see so few buzz. Like when we were talking to William Pounds on the Mayweather-Robinson debate, and he's saying that 2 fights a year is just the way some guys are going to do it, and it's not that bad. No, it is bad. It's a terrible thing, and this is why Golovkin and guys like Kovalev had so much appeal initially. Not only because they were knocking guys out, but they were fighting 3-4 times a year. If you want to generate a following. I mean, like, look at the way Golovkin was matched, and you got to give K2 a lot of credit for what they were doing. I mean, before he ever hit the big time, really, he was fighting once in Monaco. He'd fight once on the East Coast, once on the West Coast, talking about Mexican style. I mean, that was brand building. He's in the spotlight. Not constantly, because that's still not the schedule that some of the old timers had, but it's just he's in the spotlight more often. You get more tidbits, you hear him talk more often, you can relate to him a bit better. Boxing superstars should be in the spotlight far more than they are. And you look at a guy like Errol Spence, who is essentially the anointed one for Floyd Mayweather Jr. fans, right? That's a second coming for them. When you're fighting once a year, against a guy like Ocampo, or twice a year, and one guy's Ocampo and the another is so and so, you're not gonna, and you're already on the plus side of 30. You're not building fighters that way. And like I said, when you put on matchups like that, people start to tune out, and then you got to pay for pay-per-view when they put on the actual big fights.
Yeah, and you talk about Errol Spence. That's what's going to keep him from being as big as he possibly could be, even if he's as good as people think he is, because how many years can he fight like that? And then who is in that stable that he can fight after Mikey Garcia? Or will they allow him to fight?
Yeah, well, and it's like, when Al Heyman pretty much has control of the welterweight division outside Bud Crawford. I mean, you look at Errol Spence or the PBC roster, and Errol Spence has been fighting alongside Sean Porter and Keith Thurman for years now, and those fights haven't materialized. Or Danny Garcia. There's no reason that they haven't. But I've heard that Al Heyman, he was having some financial issues there, of course, with the Waddle and Reed thing, and so what I was hearing is that Al Heyman kept waiting for TV money before he put these guys in fights. And again, that's the sort of stuff that will stunt a guy's career. If you had Errol Spence 3 years ago fighting 4 times a year, even if 2 of those fights were top 20, top 30, even top 40 level guys, just to get the spectacular type knockout, and then you were putting him against 2 legitimate guys, this guy would be far bigger than he is today. But nope, he's played in the waiting game. He's barely fought at all in the last 3 years. They're killing stuff with this.
Yeah, and the bad thing there is we don't even know how good he is.
Exactly. Yeah, one fight over Kell Brook.
But outside of Kell Brook, he hasn't beaten anybody. Hasn't even fought
Exactly.
anybody. And now we're going to go the same way. What I see today is the WBA is going to mandatory Anthony Yarde into fighting Sergey Kovalev. Now, the light heavyweight division has a ton of guys that I would love to see fight Sergey Kovalev. Anthony's not one of those guys.
Nope, he's certainly not one of those guys yet. I mean, Yarde is he just doesn't look like he's ready for that. I mean, he's been fighting a bunch of soft touches in his career. I think they could have moved him a little bit faster. But no, the WBO, and I'm almost sure, I think he's under Frank Warren, if I'm not mistaken. And Frank Warren and the WBO have always been tight. They've always rubbed elbows. So I wouldn't be surprised if that came off. I think with Sergey Kovalev still being vulnerable. I mean, he boxed damn well against a lighter Alvarez. It was a damn good performance. Fooled a lot of us. But, it's still the thing with Kovalev is the dude's over 35 years old, and he's still got some chin and potential stamina issues. I mean, if you put enough pressure on him, so I think some of these guys are just trying to get their in beforehand. And I personally, I just don't think Yarde is ready. And like you said, he's not a top player in the sport. I want to see the guys like who else did I talk about? Beterbiev. I'd like to see Beterbiev and Kovalev. I mean, it's not a huge sale, but there's an angle there because Beterbiev beat Kovalev in the amateurs twice. They're two hard punching Russians. I'd like to see that stuff. Bivol, let's clear up the mess a little bit. Let's not keep milking these alphabet trinket defenses and not giving us the fights that we want to see.
Yeah, and Yarde is a guy, to me, watching him over the last 2 years, I don't really see any great improvement. I mean, to me, he's damn near the same guy he was a year or two ago.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're seeing eye to eye on this one. I mean, Yarde, he's for a guy of his build, he looks pretty muscle bound, but he's pretty fluid. He's got pretty good power. He's got pretty good speed. I mean, the base of potential looks to be pretty damn good, but you're right. I'm not really seeing much progress, and it could be the way he's matched. You never know. I mean, some of these guys, you match them soft consistently and they start getting ahead of themselves, getting confident, thinking they can just blow everybody out of the water the same way they always do. Then they're not getting those scrappy guys who give them a tough test and, test their heart a little bit or, even knock them down to where they have to get up. I just think he's been thrown in too soft. So again, that's part of the reason why I don't think he's ready for a guy like Kovalev, but we'll have to wait and see. There's so much politics going around. It's like, oh, well, does WBO enforce a mandatory? Even I think you've caught wind of this too, but Canelo Alvarez has even said that he would move up to fight Kovalev at 175. So it just seems like a lot of guesswork.
I think he wanted at 170, didn't he?
I don't know.
Yeah, that was the story I saw at least. Don't know if it's true.
Yeah, yeah, I hope not. That would almost seem like one of those Andre Ward, Chad Dawson situations. I'm not sure after all these years Kovalev could get down to 170. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know his body that well. But yeah, it's still kind of being worked out, and we'll see what happens.
All right, now we're going to do something that we've never done before on this show. We're going to talk about women's boxing, and we're going to talk about the greatest woman of all time, Claressa Shields. I was being sarcastic, against Christina Hammer. The fight was originally scheduled, I think, back in November. It's been moved. Showtime's showing it. They're saying it's the most significant fight in women's boxing history. Is it?
Well, no, that's all just marketing stuff right now. I mean, it's cool. I mean, it's a bit odd that Claressa Shields has had so many people agree with her saying that she's the greatest women's fighter of all time. Actually, it's a joke. I mean, I don't even follow women's boxing. To me, it's like watching the NBA. I'm just not into it. If I wanted to watch people at that skill level, I'll watch teenage boys or something. I'm just not into it. And for her to say that she's the greatest women's boxer of all time, again, it's a joke, okay? I don't even have to watch the sport or follow it closely to know that she's not even close to being right. Okay, you look at Katie Taylor. Katie Taylor has more talent, but just go look at Cecilia Brækhus, who's been doing this stuff for years. I mean, Brækhus has tons of title defenses under her belt. She's, a unified titleist, and I think the Ring magazine had actually given her one of the first, Ring magazine championships for women. Okay, you look at Amanda Serrano. This chick is like a 6th division titleist or something. Come on, man. Or who's I think the Dutch lady, Delphine Persoon or something. She's been a titleist for many, many years. I mean, this is all just happening because. And, you got to give it credit in this regard that, women's boxing is now an Olympic sport. So that puts it into the public eye a bit better than it was previously. And you have to give credit that Shields and Hammer are actually fighting because I got to give Shields credit, and she doesn't deserve much, but she was right here that, Layla Ali and Ann Wolfe did not fight. I mean, we're talking about the same division as Shields and Hammer, and they never got together, and that would have been a damn big fight. But no, it was avoided, and I'm pretty sure that was Layla Ali's people, because Wolfe doesn't seem like the kind of person to avoid anybody, honestly, man or woman.
No.
But you didn't get who was it, Layla McCarter and damn it, I can't think of it now. So you have to give credit where credit's due in the sense that the fight actually is happening, and it is a big women's fight. I mean, Hammer has been a titleist for a little while now, but nobody really knew who she was until, Claressa Shields kind of came along and started getting mouthy and putting herself in the public eye. But yeah, give them credit because it's actually happening. But, even if Shields goes out there and beats Hammer, she's not the best women's fighter of all time. Again, Brækhus has a far deeper resume. And again, when you look at these classes anyways, once you go above, I think, welterweight for women, what is the talent pool even like? I mean, there's like 17 ranked women in Claressa Shields' division. Women are not naturally that size. So, somebody like Brækhus and others actually fight in deeper classes than this. And that's why, when Shields is competing, they've got to trump up her opponent's resume like, oh, she's a 2-time title challenger. Well, when the competition is that low, it's not that hard.
Well, I think
to work yourself in contention.
Was like a lunch lady or something too. So you got that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All sorts of interesting characters going on. But this is my thing too, is if you're labeling Claressa Shields the greatest of all time in women's boxing, I don't really think you're following much logic there. I mean, again, I don't barely pay attention to this stuff, but Claressa Shields obviously hasn't even proven the best in her division. That's why she's fighting Shield or Hammer. So how can you be the greatest of all time and you haven't even proven the best in your weight class? It just doesn't make any sense.
But Jeremiah, just look at the stats. She's 8-0 with 2 knockouts.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, Layla Ali was, 24-0 with 21 knockouts or something, and Ann Wolfe was, 24-1 with, I don't know, a bunch of knockouts too. And I think the only defeat she had, I don't know what the circumstances were surrounding that, but I think she ended up beating the chick twice afterwards. I don't care about any of that fancy stuff. I mean, the talent pool is you start getting ahead of yourself with some of this stuff, and you're going to end up with you never know, you might end up with a Ronda Rousey. Who knows? I mean, Hammer might even win. But again, it's not a big thing to me. But again, I give him credit for actually fighting.
And the other thing here that I looked at is Claressa Shields is bad for women's boxing, I think. I mean, to me, the people that cheer for Claressa Shields and act like she's a great fighter are the same people that act like Deontay Wilder could beat Muhammad Ali. They're just basically idiots that just love it when somebody talks a mass amount of shit, whether they back it up or not.
Yeah.
They just want to see them go out and talk like idiots. If you can't speak the language that well, you usually don't end up being that huge. And when you see this, she talked about Amanda Nunes and how she would, knock Amanda Nunes out. I'm pretty sure she fights at 160 and Amanda Nunes fights at like 125 or 130. So, plus she's an MMA fighter. So I'm pretty sure she probably would knock her out. But it's just when you look at this, she also says gender doesn't come into play when I fight. So I think it does because all she fights is women. Maybe they should let her fight like Golovkin or something, and we'll see how good she is. Or Canelo. I mean, because gender doesn't come into play. And, she sits there talking about Nunez, and she says, that's why we're booming right now, because I go kick ass. Because I get out there and I T-Rex bitches. She's 8-0 with 2 knockouts. She's T-Rexed 2 bitches. The other 6 of
which I think by T-Rex what she means is, because T-Rexes had short arms, so I think she means, pretty much what a T-Rex would have to do if it was boxing you. It could only touch you. You know what I mean? It couldn't follow through because the punches were so short. I mean, she goes out. I got to admit that her style is friendlier. It is friendlier than a number of other fighters. I mean, it's friendlier than Holly Holmes was, who was more of a pure boxer on her toes and whatnot. I mean, she does go out there and fight, but she's not really T-Rexing, anybody really. I mean, I think she even got knocked down in her last fight. But again, if she's going out there and putting it on the line, that's fine. That's fine. I don't mind that. But when essentially what this is a bunch of people from Michigan who are giving her that's all it is, really. I mean, it's a bunch of people from
a lot of Flint water went into the stupidity that follows Claressa Shields.
Well, I think that's why she talks the way she does, because she's still drinking or drank too much of the Flint water. I don't know, man. It's I mean, come on. This chick is. I remember John Scully on Facebook was talking about how he met this chick, and after half a minute, he could already tell that he didn't like her just because the way she presented herself, the way she talked. I mean, let's put things into perspective. She basically said that black fighters shouldn't be fighting one another. They should be beating up people of other races. Okay. She also said that she also defended the Durrell brothers' uncle for punching Jose Uzcategui. Come on, I mean, the only people who are defending this chick are, again, they're a bunch of people from Michigan. She's not classy. She's not bright. She's, and people may not like this, and I could frankly care less. But she's not attractive. That's one selling point. That's part of the reason why Ronda Rousey was a little bit of a selling point, right? Because with the women's game,
99% of the reason why Ronda Rousey was a selling point, and it's 99% of the reason why they let Danica Patrick finish in the bottom half of almost every NASCAR race or IndyCar race she was ever in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because with NASCAR and mixed martial arts and boxing, these are combat sports. You are not going to maintain a female, you're not going to maintain the sport just on female participation, right? So a bunch of female fans are not going to consistently tune in to watch these chicks fight. I mean, so you have to appeal to, men, and looks is part of it. Looks is always part of it. I mean, somebody could hear what we're saying and be like, oh, well, it's sexist or whatever. It's also part of the male perspective as well. Yeah. I mean, go look at Oscar De La Hoya when he was coming up. You don't think that the way he looked was part of the appeal to men too? I mean, I'm not saying that they were gay, but when you look at a guy like Tevin Farmer, right, or you look at a guy like Oscar De La Hoya, there's more appeal there, right? It's Golden Boy, and
women will watch the fights then. And the problem here, and why I think she's bad for boxing, is this: maybe more women would fight or watch her fight if she carried herself better instead of just being a moron. And this is the thing. I will tweet this to Claressa Shields so you can listen to it. If she disagrees, she could come on the show and explain to us in a coherent, calm manner why we are wrong. But you know what? I guarantee you she can't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree, obviously. I mean, just follow her on Twitter if you really want to know what the kind of person she's like. I mean, shit, just watch her score fights. I mean, this is not a student of the sport. She's not an ambassador. She's cocky, right? Some people like that stuff, right? But there are different ways of going about it. Some people are cocky, but they can be classy about it as well. But some people are just cocky and come across as assholes, and she happens to be one of them.
Yeah, she is, and she may be the biggest one. The bad thing for her is nobody really cares to watch her fight. The ratings for her and Christina Hammer will not be great. And if they are, it's because guys want to watch Christina Hammer because she's a lingerie model. And let me get this straight, Christina Hammer is nothing to look at either. She's just attractive for a boxer.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, there's the appeal there. I mean, she's just good looking for a boxer. That's it. You're right.
Yeah, no more, nothing less. All right, what do you got on this day, Jeremiah?
All right, so my on this day is Jose Napoles fighting Ernie Lopez in the rematch. This constituted Lopez's fourth defense of a stretch where he would get 10 consecutive defenses before losing his alphabet title, the welterweight title, sorry. And this was the best on this day that I could find, and I ended up watching this fight. Because Napoles is a smooth operator. I really liked his style. He's one of those guys who would stand in your wheelhouse, slip jabs with ease. He slipped all punches with ease. He was just he had one of those styles that's really hard to duplicate just because of how fluid he was and just because of how good his punch radar was. I mean, most of the guys that you see fighting either want to be outside your range or they want to be inside it, depending on your style. If you're an outboxer, right, you want to be outside. If you're a brawler or a volume guy, you want to be inside. But Napoles was one of those guys who would stand right where the end of your punches would be and make you miss and then counterpunch. I mean, I really liked watching this fight just because I think it highlighted so much of what Napoles did correctly. And just the appeal in him. Again, he was smooth in everything he did. He was fluid. He would give you little lateral movement. He'd slip, and he was wonderful at throwing the left hook off the jab. One of the best I've ever seen. I mean, this is a punch that most guys cannot throw properly, especially with that speed and again that fluidity. I just loved watching it. Not only that, he was a combination puncher, right? He wouldn't get into these flashy combinations a lot of times that you saw with, De La Hoya or, some of the shoe shine stuff from Ray Leonard. It was just these simple but really effective shots where, he'd throw a jab, then he'd throw a left hook to the body and then come up top with a left hook to the head. And he was good at baiting guys too. Lopez I thought was perfect for him stylistically because Lopez was a bit like his brother. He was pretty upright, pretty stiff, not quick. So it just accentuated the things that Napoles did really well. And Lopez, to his credit, you could see that he was an old school guy. He kept throwing the jab. It's whether you're good or not, it's a good thing to stick behind, and you don't see it enough. You don't see enough of it today. But he kept throwing the jab, and Napoles is just. It's just too basic for an all-time great like Napoles, and he would just slip it here, slip it there, and then he started turning up the fight at about I think the fourth or fifth round, and just started unleashing more and more combinations, and then he finished him with a beautiful counter right uppercut that flattened him and gave him the 10 count. And that was that.
Yeah, and to me, Napoles is an all-time great, as you said, that doesn't get the credit a lot of times. I mean, if you look at him, he got upset by Billy Backus, but he came back, knocked Backus out to get it back, beat Emil Griffith, went back-to-back fights against Curtis Cokes. His problem was the division was not that great, but after he beat Clyde Gray, who was a very good fighter. I think Clyde Gray was from Canada. And the thing about that I remember is Napoles went to Canada to fight him. And then Napoles goes to, did he go to France, Italy, or was it in Mexico? I think it's Carlos Monzon. I can't remember where they fought that at. But I know it was a foreign country to us at least. But I think they fought that in France. And Monzon was pretty big in France. And the thing that stuck out to me there is there's no super welterweight division. So Jose Napoles goes from 147 to fight the 160-pound champion Monzon. Monzon's one of the all-time, probably top 5 middleweights of all time. A lot of people have him ranked number 1. And Napoles weighed in at 153 for that fight, And Napoli's did all right. He hung with him for about 4 rounds, and then Napoli's, I don't know if you've ever seen this fight, but he took a hellacious beating in the 5th and 6th rounds. But the thing I remember about this fight was reading the article in Ring Magazine about it, and how they were actually, there was a required post-fight urinalysis after the fight. Monzon, as soon as the fight was over, was still in his boxing gear. He hopped in a car and left for his hotel. And the president of France, or the French Boxing Federation, said that he would file a protest with the WBC for disciplinary action, but nothing was ever done about it. Monzon's camp claimed that the trailer provided to the fighters didn't have water, and that Monzon preferred not to stop there for the test, but he never took the drug test. But to me, the thing that made Napoli so great was the fact that he wasn't afraid to go from 147 to 160, and he never asked for a catch weight of 155 like Canelo Alvarez did.
Yeah, well, no, I think you're right. Well, and I think it's worth emphasizing, too, that Jose Napoli's actually, he didn't start off as a welterweight. I mean, this was a guy who was fighting at lightweight, I think, to start his career. And so I would have liked to have seen, I don't know if I've ever seen any footage of Napoli's at 135, but I imagine he would have been a hell of a fighter. Again, I don't know how if he was a natural welterweight and that's why he moved up, but I'd love to see him at 135, just a little bit quicker. And yeah, I think that would be damn interesting. But no, I'm with you, man. It's like you watch some of these guys who are willing to make the jump, and it happened time and time again. And it happens in the modern era too. You know, you watch Kell Brook jump up to fight Golovkin, but yeah, Napoli's he wasn't afraid, but it was one of those things. Monzon was just too big, too strong. You know, eventually could handle Monzon's length, and I don't think you dock Monzon too much for a fight like that. I mean, if you look at the career of middleweights, I think it's easy for fans that are overly cynical to say, oh well, he beat a welterweight. Well, let's really put that into perspective.
But he beat a great welterweight.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and put it into perspective, okay? So, Bernard Hopkins, he's a modern example. His 2 most well-known wins are Felix Trinidad, who's best at 147, and Oscar De La Hoya, who's best at 147. And then you have tons and tons of other examples like Monzon, like Marvin Hagler, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it was just the way it is. You didn't have this weight class fluidity that you have today, where you could, if you're Floyd Mayweather, you can just jump up to 140. You can jump to a middle weight class, right? So not middleweight, but you just jump to something in between at 154, right? And if you had the physical wherewithal, you could even drop to 140 instead of 135. So nowadays it's just easy to pick and choose who you want to fight, what class you want to fight at. But yeah, a lot of these guys they made concessions. They realized that person was a champion, and they went up and fought him. And and a lot of these guys had no bones about it as well. It's for me, it's a good win for Carlos Monzon. Okay, he's a welterweight. I mean, if you want to be hypercritical about all this stuff, you can nitpick anybody's resume and say, oh well, they weren't their prime. Oh, they weren't this. Oh, they weren't that. Well, that doesn't mean that just because it wasn't Napoli's preferred weight division doesn't mean that he wasn't a good fighter at 160 still. He was. Obviously, go watch the fight. I mean, he was classy even up there. He was a little bit slower, right? He was a little bit more sluggish, but so what? At least he tested himself, and he deserves the credit for that.
He would have beat most of the guys in the top 10 at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I would have favored him over a guy like Tony Mundine or a number of these guys. Yeah, I mean, so I think that's actually worth noting. Is a lot of times we think about like, oh well, this wasn't a guy's natural division. Okay, well, would he have beaten guys in that division who are ranked in the top 10? Because if let's imagine that he beats 5 out of the 6, or let's imagine that he was capable of being a top 5 middleweight of the era. Well, that adds some credibility to what Monzon was able to accomplish.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, think about it. Think about it. If you're a fan, listen to the show. I mean, how does he do against Jean-Claude Bautier or Tom Boggs or Tony Mundine or Tony Licata or some of these guys that Monzon ended up defending his title against? I mean, I don't think Napoli's is outclassed by any of those guys. And even if he loses to some, he's certainly not. He's not being run over.
Rodrigo Valdez is not going to run him over. might beat him, but he's not going to run him over. Benny Briscoe, I think, may beat him at 160. But this is the thing. Benny Briscoe was nowhere near the fighter that Jose Napoli's was. And that's the thing. If you look at this, I mean, how many guys did Monzon ever fight skill-wise that were as good as Napoli's?
Yeah, right. None.
No. I mean...
Point blank, none.
Yeah. Emil Griffith was a really good fighter. Nino Benvenuti was a really good fighter, but they were nowhere near the quality of Jose Napoli's. So, to me, that's one of Monzon's best wins, because if you watch that fight, Napoli's hung with him the first 3 rounds. He was just too strong for Napoli's. But he dominated Napoli's once he imposed his will. The question is this: if they're both pound for pound at the same weight and there's no advantage there, I think you can make the case that Napoli's would have gave him all he could have handled.
Yeah, right. I think it's a closer fight. Of course, it's kind of it's hard to kind of transpose those things where you shrink Monzon a little bit. And, I think
I'm just saying skill wise. When I watched the two, Napoli's, they fought different styles, and if you fought the same styles they had there, I think Monzon wears him down and probably beats him anyways. But when you look at how talented a boxer Napoli's was, I think my only point is this. The thing that hurts him is the welterweight division was not very good when he was there. And I think that most people, when they think of Napoli's, if they're old boxing fans, remember Monzon knocking him out. I think that is the biggest drawback to Napoli's. To me, though, to take the chance to fight Monzon should bring him higher up in people's eyes, not drop him lower because he got beat.
I agree. Well, I think there's I think after World War II, I think there's a number of weight divisions. Like once you started expanding weight classes and adding a few more titles, things started to thin out a little bit. And I also think the post-World War II period kind of ushered in a time in boxing where you just didn't have as much participation. I mean, you did in the smaller weight divisions. That's why, you saw the Japanese, an influx of the Japanese, and, you had some Latin fighters that, injected themselves. But for the higher divisions, I mean, you didn't really have as much participation. I mean, right? It would be years before the Eastern Europeans could participate. You had guys like, the Italians stopped participating in large numbers. The Irish competed less after World War II, right? Because a lot of these,
look at Napoli's himself. He was from Cuba, but he turned pro, I think, in the late 50s when you could still get out of Cuba. I mean, if he would have been a pro 10 years later, he wouldn't have been a pro. He would have just been a multiple, probably Olympic gold medal winner who we would have wondered what would have happened if he'd have been a pro.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're spot on, man. And it's again, it's one of those things like you look at the higher divisions. So the Irish and the Italians participated heavily, about from welterweight up. Okay, so you had guys, of course, you had like Graziano and LaMotta and Irish Bob Murphy and you had tons of Tom Loughran, Mickey Walker, right? You had a lot of guys before World War II who participated. Again, the Italians and the Irish, but even Jews. But after World War II, a lot of them went into the service, got their money, and then, went on to do other things, right? They kind of assimilated better and kind of faded into the background. They prized themselves more on education afterwards. So that's when you saw, I think that's why you saw sort of lack of talent level all around once World War II ended. But again, it is one of those things where you never know had other people participated or and you look at today's boxing landscape and you bring up the Cubans. Well, I mean, how many Cuban guys have not gone pro who might have warranted great careers in the pro boxing game? You never know. I mean, a lot of people are always going to ask questions about Savone and Tefilio Stevenson, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is we just never know, and it's unfortunate because boxing would actually be much better off if all of these guys could participate.
Alrighty, so I think we're done here. There was not much boxing news, but And I think we've established this. Wilder and Fury, neither one are afraid, but it's all bullshit either way. Sergey Kovalev shouldn't have to fight Anthony Yarde, and Claressa Shields is a moron. So, anything else you want to add before we go, Jeremiah?
Oh, geez. Well, I think you pretty much summed it up there. I would just mention that. Sorry. I would just mention that. What did I see? James DeGale retired. I don't really know the guy. It's hard to wish him well in retirement and whatnot. But it was a funny bit about Carl Froch, and I liked Froch as a fighter, but. He was talking about how he was talking about James DeGale, and he was like, "Oh, I would have smashed him to bits." I'm like, all right, Froch, just let the dude have his moment, okay? You don't need to talk about how you kicked everybody's ass in front of 80,000 in Wembley. We get it, man. You were gutsy and you were a warrior, and we appreciated you. But sometimes he just comes across as an asshole when he's got to inject himself into it. Like, oh yeah, James DeGale, you had some good fights. I would have kicked his ass though.
Yeah. But we will never know that, I guess. But Froch was pretty good. That would have been a good fight in their primes, though.
Yeah, no, I would have liked to have seen it.
I would favor Froch, though. I will agree with Carl there.
Yeah, no, I agree with Carl, too. I mean, it's just, there's a time and a place to bring that stuff up. And, when you're talking about his retirement,
that's not the time. Carl should just... Is Carl still married to that hottie with the big boobs and the dark hair?
He's got to be, man.
Well, I mean,
he's
still married to her. I mean, he should have better things to do than even talk about James DeGale. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think he has kids with her, too. I think he's got a few kids with her, lucky bastard.
Yes. Not really. He'd be lucky if her tubes were tied. You just got to bang it at will and not worry about it.
Who knows? They might be at that point right now. He's probably filling up that tank, every other night or so. I don't know what their sex life is like, but my guess is they're probably at that point where he's just pumping it full of premium every night.
Oh, Jesus. And if Carl Froch is out there listening and you want to come on and talk about this, Jeremiah will talk to you all night about it.
Yeah, I'd love to have a dedicated episode to Carl Froch and his sex life.
I'd rather have his wife on to talk about it than him.
Yeah, that's what's her name? Somebody get me her name, and then we'll send her an invite.
Send us a message. We need to get her on. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Make sure you go to iTunes, rate us, give us some feedback if you have any questions, which there were a couple questions sent tonight, but I just now noticed it on Twitter, but we're almost at an hour. We'll answer them tomorrow. We will have probably a special show tomorrow. We may see if Chris Shelton wants to come on and talk about the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. And me and Chris have different opinions of that. I don't know what Jeremiah's opinion is, but it'll be a good debate if Christopher wants to come on tomorrow night. If anybody wants to debate anything that we say, you are always welcome to tweet us at Grueling Truth or at TGTN Boxing, and we can do that. We have no problem with that. We had William Pounds on last week, who very coherently gave us the reason that Sugar Ray Robinson was not as great as Floyd Mayweather. William was wrong, but he made a coherent argument, didn't make an ass out of himself. So if you ever want to come on and try to not make an ass out of yourself, you're more than free, Jeremiah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll try to, treat you fair and equal here. I mean, I'm not a confrontational guy. Mike's a little bit more so.
No,
course,
I'm not
if you heard the debate.
Confrontational. Jeez.
Well, no, I'm not. Hey, I'm just saying you're a little bit more into it than But yeah, I mean, if you have a topic you want to discuss and debate or whatnot, yeah, come on, man, feel free.
Yeah, I'm confrontational. I'll admit it. But all right, we're gonna wrap it up. Make sure you listen to Survive in Advance tomorrow at noon, especially for fan of the NBA, as we will have NBA beat writer Cole Hanna on and Bobby Sheridan, who are NBA experts. Tomorrow night, me and Jeremiah will be back with Inside Boxing Daily. And then next week for Survive in Advance on Monday, we'll have former San Francisco 49ers center Randy Cross as our guest to talk about the NFL draft, the combine, and the best offensive lineman in the draft. So make sure you check us out. next week, Monday through Friday at noon on Survive in Advance, and me and Jeremiah Monday through Friday at 11 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you go to thegruelingtruth.net, check out all of our shows, including the last round, which I believe is a British perspective on boxing. Correct, Jeremiah?
No, just one half of it. So the one of the co-hosts is British.
It's a half a British perspective on boxing and a half American perspective.
There you go.
Also, you can hear Michael Montero, who also writes for The Ring Magazine and The Neutral Corner, his podcast, and John Raspani and Dennis Taylor, who are doing great with their podcast, the second most listened to boxing podcast on thegruelingtruth.net. So make sure you check out their Ringside Boxing Show. We're going to wrap it up for tonight. I just want to thank everybody for listening so far this week, and we're going to try to finish strong for you tomorrow night. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.